Porsche earned its reputation by building high-performance vehicles that appeal to demanding drivers. Drivers looking for sleek, aerodynamic, fast cars find they can take the wheel of a Porsche and conquer the most demanding roads. Knowing the racing heritage of these cars, it's easy to let your mind drift as you dream of competing at Le Mans or challenging the sands of Dakar. All Porsches share a common legacy of automotive innovation, no matter where they're driven. A legacy that began with the company's namesake, Dr. Ferdinand Porsche, early in the 20th century. Throughout his career, Porsche and his cars would lead the way. His designs were first noticed on Europe's roads as he developed several sporty vehicles for major German manufacturers. Starting in 1924, when Porsche took over for designer-in-chief Paul Daimler at Mercedes, he began to create a series of fast, supercharged cars. These powerful and sporty models set the Mercedes drivers apart from the crowd. His most famous creations, the SS and SSK supercharged cars for Mercedes, were equally at home on the road or on the track. These cars had a low center of gravity that aided handling and lightweight but powerful engines. The superchargers tripled the amount of air going into the carburetor and pushed performance up to 300 horsepower. This was tremendous power for that time. Today, these cars have become collectors' favorites. Porsche's next project was designing a prototype car for Wanderer. This car was never mass-produced, and Wanderer soon merged with 4 other companies to form Auto Union. After the Wanderer, he began to work on a new, high-powered racing engine. This engine would form the basis for a series of revolutionary Grand Prix race cars, the Auto Union Silver Arrows. Like latter-day Porsches, these cars placed the engine behind the passenger compartment instead of in the front. And they were aerodynamic. They're considered to be the first modern race cars, far more advanced than anything else on the road at the time. These cars looked futuristic, but the combination of a mid-engine and independent suspension made them hard to handle. But especially skilled drivers like Bernd Rosemeyer and Tazio Nuvolari learned to control the cars. Auto Union and the Mercedes team dominated European Grand Prix racing in the 1930s. Backing both teams was a state subsidy from Adolf Hitler. Auto Union would not have received the financial aid if it wasn't for Porsche's personal plea. Hitler was impressed by the confident and brilliant engineer. Several years later, in 1938, he asked Porsche to help produce the Volkswagen, or people's car. The Porsche team threw itself into the work of designing and building this affordable, easy-to-repair family car. They created an inexpensive automobile that could easily cruise the newly built autobahns at 60 miles per hour. Always interested in speed, Porsche thought about a sports car based on the Volkswagen. He convinced the government to give him the money to build 2 prototypes, the 60 K10s. These cars were built for a race from Berlin to Rome. They were finished and set to go by the end of the summer of 1939. The cars were ready, but in September of 1939, Hitler launched another race, a blitzkrieg into Poland. The world was at war. Ferdinand Porsche was named president of the Armour Commission of the Ministry of Arms and Munitions. He went to work developing tanks and other military vehicles. To protect the company from Allied bombing attacks, it was split into 3 groups. One was set up in a remote Austrian farming community, Gmund. This workshop would serve as the haven from which Porsche and his son Ferry would relaunch their car business after the war. Their first big post-war break came from a former member of the Outer Union team, Tazio Nuvolari. He wanted them to create a new Grand Prix car. Nuvolari convinced a wealthy industrialist, Piero Duccio, who'd made a fortune selling boots to the Italian army, to back the project. This collaboration produced a stunning and advanced race car, the Cisitalia. Ferry Porsche was pleased with the results, and it inspired him to resurrect his father's plans for a Volkswagen-based sports car. The earliest Porsches took the Volkswagen pan, transmission and engine, modified them, and wrapped these borrowed components into a hand-built, streamlined aluminum body. Using Volkswagen parts, Porsche was able to keep its costs down while working on developing the refinements that would make the car stand out. The car's basic design owed a styling debt to the pre-war 60K10 race cars, but it was more refined and modern. The curvy, fluid, sexy lines gave the impression of having been conceived in a wind tunnel. In fact, there was no money for that. The shape was pure designer's intuition. The car was beautiful, but launching a new car company was risky. It would take a lot of hard work to ensure success. Starting in 1948, Ferry Porsche took the car to various European motor shows, where it was noticed by the press. Ferdinand Porsche had long dreamed of producing a world-class sports car. Finally, it was coming true. But in 1951, he died, just as his cars began to triumph around the world. Ferry looked to an American, Max Hoffman, to help him grow the company by introducing the car to sports car fans in the United States. America was the land of low-cost, giant cars in the post-war era. Expecting to sell small sports cars in the American market seemed like a long shot. However, Ferry knew there was a passion in the United States for the small British MG sports cars. He hoped to capitalize on that interest. Hoffman thought he should redesign the car to make it look more like the MG. Although Ferry resisted, Hoffman agreed to represent the cars. The Porsche 356 offered more performance and style than the MG. It was more fun to drive and more reliable, although more expensive. It began to find a niche. By 1954, Hoffman was selling 11 cars a week, 30% of the factory's output. The car's design could add a little excitement to driving. The engine in the rear shifted the weight distribution, which could cause the car's back end to come loose during a turn. Drivers had to have a fast pair of wrists and a great seat-of-the-pants feel for driving. It was a test of skill. Some said, if you could drive a Porsche, you could drive anything.